somewhere, lost.
Your glasses are in the post, lost.
Yeah.
You've just started the show with your glasses are in the post, lost. Why? Why
Well,
are they in the post?
Well, I ordered some new glasses. I get mine from Glasses Direct, and I went through the whole rigmarole of ordering them, which when you've got ADHD is quite entertaining when you're trying to do some sort of discount on them. So I went through the whole thing, and then I realised then that like you had to get the second pair free, but you don't get the lenses free. So once you start adding it up, you're like, okay, that bit is free, but I don't really have the money to pay
Just
for the
get the
extra
frames,
glasses.
no lenses.
Anyway, I know. So anyway, in the end, I was like, so I ordered them and then realised, when I ordered the one pair, I would have been better off going in and getting the deal that was like 30% off. So they were really good, Glasses Direct. Big shout out to them. I messaged them and I said, could I cancel the order because I messed up? And they were like, yeah, it's fine. And I messaged them and I said, thank you so much, because literally they cancelled the order just like that. No hassle, no nothing. And they just said, we put a note on there to say that you're going to be reordering. And I ordered, but unfortunately, I don't know, there's something wrong with my address because this happened before. And I get a thing, I'm all excited that the glasses are coming, and then it says they couldn't deliver them. And I remember this happening last time, them saying there's a problem with my address, but my address is my address, it's the same. So they're somewhere out there. They've gone back to them, but I think they come back out again. But I need them because my glasses are in quite a bad way. They're really wonky because I dropped them once or sat on them or something.
Welcome, everybody, to A Better Way of Life. That was the tale of Glasses Direct, an organisation that
Welcome
can't
to my life.
necessarily find your house with glasses, but or perhaps they can. Who knows?
They're wonky though.
Yeah.
Unless my ears are wonky. I don't know. It might be.
I don't know. I don't know. On today's show, we will be dealing with everything from neurodivergence through to workplace adjustments and more. And we have a guest today who will be joining us shortly. My first take to today, and I just want to grab people's attention on this. I did take to TikTok first thing this morning in utter disbelief on this. Yeah, occasionally I like to go on there just to vent. Hello, Lottie. I knew Lottie would just appear out of the screen somewhere at some point in this proceedings. Was that somebody posted first thing on LinkedIn this morning that since going freelance, they have had the epiphany that they can now just work 3 hours a day.
Okay, then.
Well, yes, absolutely. And I came back with the response, but surely that depends, doesn't it? Right? Because they were kind of like saying that, you know, if you go freelance, then, you know, you don't need to do this 9 to 5 anymore, 5 days a week. You can just do three hours a day. And I was like, yeah, but surely it depends on like what you're doing in your business and also how much work you need or how much work you've got. I mean,
I think that's something I was saying to someone the other day about this, that it's almost, we're in a playing field that isn't level, but LinkedIn, I'm going to say that because it's mostly what I use, kind of assumes that we're all the same, and we're not, you know. And I've had many a conversation with people about this to say, where I've put pressure on myself, like, oh God, you know, things aren't great, I'm not getting enough work in. Or there's times that when I first started working with you, that I would feel bad if I wasn't working all the time. But the fact of the matter is, we all have different ways of working. We all have different everything, really. Some of us don't need to earn much. Some do. Yeah. Some do it for fun. I just saw somebody put a post about side hustles. How many people have got side hustles? And I know lots of people have, but people that have got side hustles, it's quite damaging when they're doing the side hustle not very well, and then it ends up taking over from the person that's doing it as the thing. Well,
yeah, no,
absolutely. When they're not doing it, they're doing it.
Can we just clarify something you said, by the way, there, which is that LinkedIn assumes when you're talking about LinkedIn, you're talking about the people of LinkedIn, because obviously, the platform is agnostic. It doesn't know anything, right? It's like people talking about the algorithm. The algorithm doesn't care. It really doesn't care at all, right?
Have you got feelings?
It doesn't have feelings. It picks up on what people, you out there, are seeing as popular. If you make it popular, the algorithm feeds you. If you don't, then it doesn't. So it's as simple as that, really. The platform doesn't care. But yeah, people make assumptions all the time, don't they?
Well, yesterday my Lamborghini posts that came with a lot of assumptions on that one and quite a lot of debate. And
I didn't even know it was a Lamborghini because a car's a car to me. But there you go.
I've driven one. I think it was an orange one. That was very scary when the guy told me it was 320 grand. I don't know whether I felt more scared about the fact it was 320 grand or I was in charge of a car that was 320 grand, or that other people could afford a car that was that much.
I wouldn't get in it.
A lot of the comments on there were interesting because people didn't actually read the post. There was a lot of people on there trying to be funny, not being funny. And yeah, it was funny because it was symptomatic of what happens out there, that people don't read things properly. The baked bean one that I put out there, and I did say to people, go and look at my profile, go and look at my feed and see actually what I'm saying on here, because you're not actually reading the post properly. You're not looking into me to see what I'm actually saying here is that I have got a sense of humour, but there's actually a serious point to it. Or somebody said also that I was clickbait, and I said, well, arguably isn't everything that you put out there. He said, well, if you've got something to say, just say it. I said, unfortunately, just saying it often doesn't get you seen, and not all here just to have a laugh.
No, absolutely. Let's bring our guest in today. This is someone that you've worked with. This is somebody that I know as well. This is Prem. Hello.
Hello.
Coming all the way from, where are you coming from?
My living room.
Your living room.
Yes, exactly. The classic kind of remote worker living room in southeast London.
Yeah. How long have you worked in your living room?
This morning, actually, just an hour. I spent half an hour actually working kind of upstairs. I've come down, but I think, last few years, and especially since COVID, the living room worker lifestyle is quite well known to probably too many of us.
Okay, tell us a little bit about you, and then I do want to get back to the living room at some point, because I love the whole sort of conversation around spaces and where people work, because I think it's quite interesting. But tell us a bit about you.
Okay, cool. So thank you for having me on. I guess I came to this through Marianne. So I have been working around kind of community health and social impact for the last probably now coming into around 5 years. And at my previous kind of employer, I was noticing that some of the systems and things I've got in place, especially around neurodivergence, weren't really working well for me. I've kind of leaned into that, to be honest, a bit more, and decided to go into freelance, which is why we've had even more conversations and I'm picking up new challenges and new tips. Right now working in sort of community health advocacy and specialising in building more sort of inclusive healthcare, social care, and the wellness industry as a whole, which is not necessarily the most inclusive space to be in.
Not at all. Well, a lot of spaces aren't inclusive, are they?
No.
No. And just for people that are perhaps not ever sort of ventured down that rabbit hole of inclusion, there are still people out there that think inclusion means we build a ramp for a wheelchair, where and actually the majority of inclusion these days is not that. The majority of inclusion is around sort of digital spaces. It's around just language. It's around conversation. It's around how we talk to people, all sorts of things. I'm still amazed at just how narrow people's field of vision is when it comes to inclusion. Are you?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because I think that the trend into kind of diversity, equity, inclusion, that had its, a reaction, to be honest, out of what was happening in the world, with Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, a lot more sort of social media traction talking about people being kind of different and all deserving to have some kind of equitable opportunities. But it wasn't really seen as that. It was just like, if we've got people who are different, it should all work itself out. And then you kind of then had a little bit of a transformation into inclusion and belonging. And actually, diversity is part A, or could be part C. And if you made a place that everyone could feel like they belong, it would naturally be diverse. And actually it comes after. And then the kind of inclusion piece is now a lot of corporations and even public services have come away from it, because they are seeing it either as something optional. It's actually a lot of work to, try and think about people who are marginalized. And there's a huge power dynamic part of it. Even the word inclusion assumes that you are in the position of power and you're including people. Yeah. So the way I'm trying to think about this, and the venture I'm working with, Mendful, we're thinking about health inequalities and inequities. And it's really about designing services and products and all the spaces in between with communities and people who were on the outside, actually just excluded, never for them and definitely never without them. But actually, the dream is those people have decision-making power. Real inclusion will look like people designing for themselves.
Correct. I'm so glad you say that, because I literally, just before we started this podcast, and I'll give him a shout out, literally just come off the phone with one of my other clients, Ajay, who's blind. Very excited because he's just updated his website, and he's moved his website from a WordPress site to hosting somewhere else with another system. And we were talking about that and what it gave him. And he said he literally, with this new site, because it's AI driven, he can literally tell it to add things to it, and then it will open it up in a, not just a canvas like things like ChatGPT do, but in proper sort of working model mode, so that he can use that with a screen reader, and he can go through it so that he can check what it's going to look like to other people. And it's completely enabled. And last month he spoke to me and he said, I've developed an app for me for when I go down the gym using AI, because I've tried every single app that's out there and none of them work for me. Right. And it's interesting because it's part of his ethos and dynamic. He was captain of the England blind football team when he was younger. And he did that because he said, I can achieve anything. And he now goes into schools and whatever and says, I can achieve anything. And it's an empowerment thing in a way, this inclusion thing. It's not about saying, oh, look at poor you over there. We need to do this for you. It isn't about enabling people to be innovative in a space and work through their own problems and actually come up with their own solutions, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, there's responsibility, obviously, from people in kind of decision-making capacities, because, that's a huge barrier for a lot of us. But that's a great story, I guess, to share as well, from real people, like you said, taking some ownership. And so many people want to, but again, part of it is, like, we're told, especially in the healthcare and social care space, is do it on your own. Like, do it as an individual, because that's the way our society is constructed as well. And this whole, piece around belonging is often just finding a community of people who want to support you as well, and each other. So that whole kind of community care piece, community supporting, your empowerment, and actually that being a more preventative model of wellness, that being more sustainable actually as well for innovating is the key. It's not all individuals kind of competing against each other.
That's so interesting you say that, because we had a meeting with somebody yesterday, and point came up that the thing that we were trying to look at, because there's a huge problem, is made a lot more difficult because I think from experience and seeing that the people that have got the money therefore have the power don't get it. They have their meetings, but they don't get the people that get it in the meetings. And I was saying to this person in the meeting we had, already had a meeting, and said, you know, I see a lot, but I'm on my own. I'm on my own, and it's a really difficult place to be, because on the one hand, I could go and join somewhere, be employed. It's not going to work. But that then you become part of that. And the issue I've then got is that if they're not talking about the issues that I can see are there, you're shut down then. And that then becomes a problem for me. So then you sit on your own, and then you're like, oh, I want to try and find my people. And I think when you can, it's great, but it's still trying to battle through that bureaucracy that's there, that you are stopped from making a difference, because a lot of those decisions are made in places that the little people can't get to. How can you get to? Or as a token gesture, somebody may be invited to something because somebody's been picked to be on a board. But those people that get picked to be on a board, I saw it recently that somebody that I know, quite a few people were asked to go to represent in Parliament, I think it was. And I thought, oh, I didn't know about that. And you sort of think, where do all these decisions get made? And I do wonder, even it's not the same, but to a degree, as our doctor's surgery, they have the friends of the surgery, and they do all sorts of things with the surgery. That they ask lots of questions. And my neighbour at 79, he's one of the ones that's on there, and my friend is on there as well. She cares for her elderly parents. Her mum has got dementia, so she spends half the week looking after them. And when they'd had one of the meetings, they have to take it in terms of taking the minutes. And my friend last minute couldn't go, I think it was. And the lady that runs it, who is older, was annoyed and said that you're not showing commitment. And I was furious when I heard about this, because I said, what's the choice then in the end? She's going to back out of being part of it. And if you don't get, you know, that diversity in terms of who is part of that committee, you know, I fed back to my neighbour and said, the doctor's surgery always texts the day before. And so one day I was doing what I was doing in the morning, probably chatting to Graham, and then I got to, I don't know, 11 o'clock and went, oh my God, I was supposed to go to the doctor. I completely forgotten. I was upstairs working and I'd forgotten. So I fed back to him that it would be really helpful, actually, if you could send it like at the beginning of that morning or like half an hour before your appointment. Because if you've got parents that are getting kids ready to school, or people that have got ADHD, they'll probably forget. We don't mean to, but if you don't look around to see what the issues are from a wide variety of people, whether it's because of someone's culture or because of a disability, you're not going to hit the mark right. And so you can keep posting about how many appointments are missed, but I'm there going, I did try and tell you.
Well, this is a problem with design, isn't it, Prem? I mean, this is a problem of not giving people choice in design, because ultimately there will be people out there that if they got something that morning, right, might go, oh, for goodness sake, I don't, you know, this is intrusive to me. Right. Really, what you need to be able to do with any system is choose when when and how that looks like for you. Right. Because.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is I think it gets tricky on a digital level, right? Because this kind of idea of super personalized things, this isn't new. It's talked about a lot when it comes in to design, and it's usually around kind of products, and it's usually around kind of the symptoms as well that you're trying to solve in healthcare, where there's that personalization. But when it comes to prevention, and we're thinking about that is actually where there's maybe and often a little bit more space for community and common issues than there is you're going down the route of personalized solutions. That part definitely on the design front, there needs to be more done there always. But again, I think of like communities coming together and finding out different ways to solve that. As you've said, kind of, Marianne, like, you already have the answers. This is what always happens with people who are struggling with anything. And so much in the health and social care space is loads of the answers are there. You're right, the decision making, the money, the power isn't there to implement them. But it's also on those levels of solving too late. And when we actually try and bring it back to prevention and then having community-led prevention models, that is where it is about more seeking common ground, seeking consensus. And in design, I always talk about life-centered design. Human-centered design had its whole big explosion as well of like, a lot of places I worked at and some of the corporates are, we've got a human-centered design service, like amazing. We live in a world right now, and we always have done, where humans aren't the only people who are here on our planet. And when I think about life-centered design, really, in conjunction with planet, with the people around us, the ancestors, the culture, our resources, environmentally, it comes back to these community-led models, building consensus, designing for the people who might have some of those differences. And actually, when you design for them in mind from the start, you don't need to get to these personalized solutions. I think about did you know I'd heard this not that long ago on curbs where it dips down.
Yep.
That was originally designed for people in wheelchairs, right?
Yeah.
And it's ended up helping, of course, people in prams, people who got a bike with them or a trolley who might need to go up. I was carting a wheelbarrow around the other day with a load of rubble to the community garden, and there is no chance in hell that I would have been able to lift that wheelbarrow up even a small curb. So yeah, it's just all of these examples around us. But trying to bring people back into thinking about design for prevention is also important.
Why do you think that is such a problem? I've talked about this recently about how I will say it till I'm blue in the face, really, that I see so often that consultants go in to sort out the problems, and I'm there every day on LinkedIn talking about the solutions that could, whether it is in training or whatever it is. I'm saying, but surely if you just did this at the beginning, you wouldn't be spending vast amounts more on the stuff that you said you couldn't afford, like right back at the beginning. And it doesn't really matter where it is. It doesn't matter. Even, my son was sent to isolation, and I had a conversation with school yesterday, and they said, but I said, I don't agree with isolation, so I don't. And they said, but this is the way that it's done across the county. I said, it doesn't make it right. I said, because if you're actually looking at what's better for that child, like we were talking about well-being, then if you're looking at a blanket approach, which is what they're doing, it's lazy behavior management. And I think that doesn't matter whether it's behavior management or whether it's managing people, wherever it is, whether it's in a healthcare system or in a workplace system. Who is it, or what is it that stops that? Because I just feel at despairing point with it all, really, because I see how much money is spent on fixing the problems.
Is it not? Doesn't it not come from agendas? Does it not come from different agendas, etc.? I mean, like, I can give you really obvious examples. I mean, an incredibly obvious example is that if you think about office design, right? Where does office design start from? It starts from the A&D community, etc. You go to an architect, they design, etc. And quite often one element of that will be that there's a pride in developing and creating a space that looks aesthetically pleasing, right? So to tell an architect, but we want to include humanness in here, so Jack wants to needs a chair that does this and it looks like this, and then Cynthia needs one that looks like this, and she needs a desk that goes up and down and whatever, it goes against that aesthetic of everything is level, all the chairs look the same, the lighting is set for mood or for, for aesthetics, as opposed to, someone needs task lighting, somebody doesn't need lighting, somebody, humans are messy. And then you're feeding into something which is design led, and that
shouldn't somebody be speaking up somewhere? My gym, they £5 million they spent on it, and I can't say any more about how disappointed I am. I cannot say how disappointed I am. It was going to be amazing. It was going to be, and it's awful. It's awful from the fact that they've put a mural up that's covered up where the mirrors were that you need when you're doing Pilates or yoga, down to where the weights area is. If you were visually impaired, you'd really be in trouble. Down to where you walk up the stairs, all the mats are there. So for one, I'm not massively bothered, but there'd be a lot of people that don't really want, they want to be stretching, probably out of the way of.
I think there's always going to be these tensions. I think there's always going to be these tensions between one set of values and another set of values.
But when a whole thing isn't done right for the customer, I can't understand this. I can't understand how anybody could have pride in something, or they're having, so that the company have got pride in what they've paid for, I suppose.
But someone along that line may have gone, but this looked great on a brochure.
No, I absolutely get that. I get that. But this is where I see that there is a space for the people that do the thing. So architects or teachers or whoever they are. Even if it is somebody going in to do painting, we've offered training for people on dementia so that when they go into a care home, they understand what they're going into. So surely somebody that's an architect should therefore, within their training or their education, they should be educated about this.
But does it not come down to like commercial concerns though, Prem? Because actually, ultimately, you can bring more stakeholders in, you can get more views and ideas as to which way to go with it. But every time you bring another stakeholder in, it costs more money. There's more consultation. It takes longer. It throws things out, and ultimately, somebody makes a decision in the end where they go, "Well, that will do. We just need to do this."
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you've both hit on a few different points, I think there. If I speak to kind of, there's one model I might want to raise, and it's to a word that you've just said, consultation. So there's this model. It's called the ladder of participation, and it's basically about civic participation. How do you get people involved to sign up to anything? And on the bottom of the ladder, it's the idea of there is no signing up. It's basically coercion, the bottom rung, right? You're told this is what you're doing and you're forced into it. And then you go up a couple of rungs and there's some bits in between where it's like you're informed, you're told this is what's going to happen. So that feels like, okay, you're sort of included a bit more. There's kind of engagement where you might have had some conversation and dialogue about it, but they're probably going to go ahead with it anyway. Consultation, you've done a survey, or maybe there's been a few interviews, but the actual, I don't know, all the juicy information out of that is still reinterpreted and probably retrofitted into what they were wanting to do anyway. And then you've got co-design, which gets thrown around a lot, like, oh, we've sort of sat here together and designed out what's going to happen. And then at the top is this model of co-production. And this is actually saying you're bringing the people in who are going to be they've got the needs of using whatever this service or product is. They're actually going to be running it. Now, the mindset it takes to do that shift from a purely sort of commercial giving, like delivering a need and delivering a solution, to redistributing that power and building people's capacity and skills to deliver it themselves. That's where I talk about community-led prevention models, because that's where you're actually saying, of course, you could say, okay, this service is going to have to be bringing in so much more money to do consultation with all of these extra people and then put it into a report. and they're going to have to pay consultants to put the report together, and then they're going to have to figure out the solutions after that. Well, yes, that probably would take a lot more time and money. But if you thought about doing it in a different way, which was bringing people into some of those roles of decision making and production straight away, the prevention part, I mean, it's always tricky. It would cost more in the short run, but when you again think about prevention, that is where you are putting in the investment. You're investing in preventing the outcomes and the difficulties that people get into in all sorts of ways. I think about my housing, and housing is health. Like when I think about health and I talk about healthcare, I'm talking about your fundamental needs, your basic safety. The way that the major works, I live in a council housing estate, the way that major works plans happened was a lot of consultation. I felt like it was coercion sometimes. I had people knocking at my door saying, "Hey, I'm here to refill in your bricks today because there's air gaps in them." And I was thinking, what I've got to work in my living room, actually. I can't be dealing with that noise. But what's happening now with all of the issues is they're having to do another independent consultation and fix a load of the issues. They were changing things that people didn't need changed, that cost a lot. So it's always tricky, Graham. You're right to feel like you're justifying it on a betting on outcomes, but inherently that's wrong. If you're actually building up people's skills capacity and getting them to design it themselves and produce it themselves, which is what communities do outside of these systems all the time, then you're kind of hopefully bypassing that a bit.
It's interesting because you say that, because if you look at smaller businesses, so I look at my business, and someone fed back to me the other day that they loved the way that I do the assessment. They loved it. And I said, it's taken me a long time, Graham knows how long, a long time, to make sure that it works for me when I'm marking that work, but also so that when the learner goes in, that system works for them so that they aren't going to struggle. So I've probably used a lot of my things I find difficult, having ADHD, knowing that a lot of the things that you struggle with when you've got ADHD, a lot of other people do, given that a lot of people say, isn't everybody a little bit ADHD? Well, try lots of the things. So I used those things to make it so that was a service that I was offering. And it's funny that what you see is the smaller businesses will try and do it right for their customers, often not having the money behind them to do it. They don't have that money behind them. So yeah, maybe I'm just not suited for the corporate world then, but maybe I should be. What's the point in producing something or having a service like you were saying?
That is one of the problems. That is one of the problems of the corporate world, which is that responsibilities and jobs get decompartmentalized, and then with that, there's a preciousness. That's my responsibility. That's my job, right? And as soon as you create that, it means that person's not going to talk to that person about it unless it's on the agenda to talk about that, right? Whereas, you're right. I mean, that's why smaller companies can succeed and can be better, which is that they are more agile and also they're more prepared to take part in those conversations because they realize that builds relationship and that's important for them to move forward. But I've seen it having worked with larger organizations. Everybody knows the experience where they've been passed from pillar to post.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And why does that happen? It's because, it's not on that person's brief even though part of it's not on their brief to actually deal with that, and there's whole films where it's been made into comical farce where people get passed through every department in the building until they end up at the department where they first started the conversation and they go, okay, we'll deal with it now. Which,
interestingly, given why, that's not why, arguably why I was working with Prem, but having a diagnosis of ADHD, it does then become very, very frustrating, even just that being passed from pillar to post, and you just go, even yesterday, you know, we're looking at getting my son diagnosed. So we've gone through the initial assessments. And I suddenly thought, I haven't heard from them for ages. And so, of course, I then got back in contact with them. And I thought, given what you're doing, and given that I've told you I've got ADHD, it would be really good if you were kind of on the ball with it to remind me, like, well, I shouldn't have to be reminding you, because like now we're months down the line sort of thing. But with that whole, you know, when there's so many steps to have to do something, most people, I'm not going to say all, but most people that have got ADHD will just check out because of that executive function, which I've gone over a lot, Prem. I think once I went over that with you, the penny dropped. And it does with a lot of people. When I say about executive function, why for me to get up and do something over there is difficult. And yet if the doorbell rings, I can go and do that. That's not a problem. I can run into the house. So it does then mean that I think that that's not very inclusive. And I think that's where a lot of businesses don't think that you've completely made life very, very difficult for somebody just by making all those steps in there. So did you, I mean, I've been working with Prem for a while now. I think we did that, well, not right at the beginning, did we? But fair way at the beginning, because I think it was quite an interesting thing to learn, because you wanted to learn more, didn't you, about how you could, I always say this, present better in the world. By understanding yourself better.
Yeah, I think there's like there's a few things that you've both kind of like, you know, the brain, the ADHD brain is definitely always like firing on all cylinders as you're both talking. There's a connection probably coming up between kind of what you've both said. So like Graham, you talking about this, like, you know, and I'm the same. I've worked in big places and big organizations where public, private, that siloed department, and then even just like individual people, right? Struggling to share. And I was also thinking about what you said about it's really difficult to design, like some groups might have completely opposing needs and individuals having completely opposing needs. And so how would you solve for that? And the thing that Marianne, when we were working together, that really made a difference to me, and part of the reason that I chose actually and wanted to work with you is because firstly, you do get a lot. I've never worked with an ADHD coach before, right? I've been diagnosed for 4 years now, but actually wanted my diagnosis at probably the age of around 17, 18, constantly getting shelved off as it's just depression, it's just anxiety, it's just insomnia. Again, siloing the symptoms for something that's incredibly holistic and affects all areas of your life. And I wanted to work with you because you presented it as, look, there are some challenges that you're going to have with yourself, frustrations, you recognize that. But yes, this is about how you might, you know, survive and work through this world. It's also about how that world works with you and how your bosses and your peers and your managers and your team work back with you. And there's a huge amount of empathy. And I wanted to come to this word because that is where I think you're right, Graham, you can't always have consensus. But if you can build understanding of why someone might need something or why they might behave in a certain way, and you can have some level of empathy around that, it does give people space to show up as they are, and also actually often solves, just by the non-judgment and the empathy and the understanding, a lot of the issues that end up coming from this. And I'll talk about it, as a very individual level. Us going through the kind of executive functioning and the more like science behind maybe why, you know, certain things come up, helped me then probably accept some things, talk about them. Actually, even just having an ADHD coach and speaking to my boss, Adrian, about that. He was so good and so like empathetic then with why, you know, I might want to do something in a different way. And literally just by the gift of that, I probably didn't have as many challenges as I would have done. Like there wasn't, do you know what I mean? There wasn't really a solution. The solution was the non-judgment. It was the acceptance. It was the understanding and the empathy.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I think I know that many people work with many different frameworks, lots of coaches do, and I still think they try and treat people like a project as such, or that if we do this and then we do that and that. But I never saw that. Maybe it's because of how I've tried to work with myself, let's just say, from having had counselling as well. And so my counselling is probably not even the traditional sort. I go in and I don't know what I'm going to talk about in there. But I sort of saw that, we could have started at the beginning and said, right, okay, I found out about you, because you've got to, haven't you? And then I said, what do you want from it? What is it you want from it? And that there's a whole big discussion about that. And then, yes, we would have an agenda, but we did sit and we mapped out, by you saying to me, what you felt you wanted to cover. And then we put that into some sort of order because it sort of felt well with that. And I think the bit that was really, really I saw for you actually, and for me, being able to then help you, was we did the executive function bit because I felt like that was really good for you to understand the why, because we beat ourselves up. I hear people on a daily basis, not even people that have got ADHD, that will say that they feel shame about something or they can't do something, and I go, you do know why you're struggling with that, don't you? Even from not unpacking their suitcase, loads of people do it. So when I go through the why people don't unpack their suitcases, it's not because you're lazy, it's because of the fact that that's a huge amount of jobs in one. They go, okay. Then I talk through maybe how I would go through it, having had years of that. So I felt like doing that bit was really helpful because it would take away some of the shame that you would felt about yourself. Then what we did, which I thought was great, and you came up with it, was you said to me, can I go through my CV with you?
Yeah.
And we literally sat for an hour and Prem talked about her
failures.
Education. Well, her education, she talked about her education. Yeah. And then she talked about work, but talked through the whole thing. But having gone through the executive function bit as well, I was able to sort of jump in and say, can you think back to what we did last week and why that might have resulted in that? So it hopefully then didn't become, excuse me, you were able to step away from looking at all of that history and going, oh God, to that happened, but it happened because of X, Y, and Z. And actually now we're looking forwards and, then looking forward into your business and how you were going to put right some of the things that you felt had gone wrong. But I always say to people that when things don't go right, that's actually a chance to grow. And anything that's ever gone wrong in my life, I've tried to use it then to try and support other people. And that's why I said to you, with what you do moving forward with your business, is that it's likely that people will gravitate to you because of who you are. You're not that corporate. You are you. And I think people feel safe when they're around people that they don't have to keep being perfect around.
Yes.
So and I've seen massively I won't say the change in you, but just the way that you view you. And I said, I don't know if you mind me saying this, but I have said it to you before. I feel really proud of.
No, it's really nice.
You're presenting as you. You're presenting as you now, and saying, do you know what? This is me. This is me.
And I also want to say I feel like I've been educated this morning as well, because I think every day's a education day. But I fully appreciate your whole thing around the community solution as well. I feel like that is absolutely right, because and another example, because I've been out there in the workplace, I've seen it, but another great example of that in practice was I went to do an assessment once in a bank building. It wasn't a branch, but it was a bank building, and this lady who was in a wheelchair, who was on the management team, was having to wheel herself out of the side of the building, along the side of the building, back in through a side entrance, into the service lift, not a person lift, but a service lift with you know, mop buckets and everything else, up to the next floor and then along the corridor in order to get to management meetings, right? And they were overly looking for us. Well, by the time they realized it was a problem, they were then overly looking for solutions. And the reason people start overlooking for solutions and start going, oh no, you know, it's because the point is that nobody had actually seen her and her plight, if you like, before that. And I think, and you know, when you were talking earlier about, the fact that we get people with different needs and sometimes diametrically opposed needs, you know, on a project, and then how do you design around it? Sometimes it just comes down to community getting together and actually seeing the needs of that community and actually then working together to understand those needs. And sometimes the solutions are the simplest solution. And they were talking to me. They said, well, do we need to put some kind of standard stair lift in here, and then how would that work? Or do we take out a whole block here and whatever? And I said, do you know what, having talked to this community of people that are using this, you have an office at the front of the building, right?
Just use that,
which you could use for meetings.
Excellent. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But don't you think though that whenever I hear about neurodiversity training, I seem to have died down now, but that was like the big thing. And the way from that I approached it was because I'd spoken to Sarah May, actually. She's an HR consultant, and she'd spoken to Adrian. And the way I looked at it differently is that I see that I'm a troubleshooter, really. And I don't see you as a problem. The way I look at it is there is a problem to be solved, and that is getting the job done. And that actually, if I speak to you and I find all about you, and then potentially speaking to a manager as well, because often what does happen, and I don't think it happened in your situation, but a lot of the time people get performance managed when actually it doesn't need to have got to that point. Actually, it's a manager doesn't know what to do. And so you can have all of that training. You can have that, and that's an awareness, really. But really what needs to happen is someone like me comes in and says, right, okay, let's just, if you tell me what the problems are. And I did, you know, I'd spoken to Adrian, I'd spoken to you, and then you sort of say, right, okay, we've got a problem to solve here, you know. And so it's about working together with that. And often what ends up happening is, it didn't happen in your situation, is the employee and the manager, that becomes a problem. There becomes a huge barrier there. And so I sort of come in to be an intermediary then to say, look, okay, you know, you speak to the one side and then you speak to the other. And actually probably I would say, not in all situations, is that the manager's probably ill prepared because they've not had the actual people management training. They probably want to do it right. Fear might come into it, ignorance comes into it. And if they're not given that opportunity, or they're too scared to know how to broach it, they're never going to be able to. But by bringing somebody in to do that, actually what ends up happening in the future, as I said to you, is that I wouldn't really be needed.
Yeah, and that's, yeah.
You know, I wouldn't be needed.
And that's the same, that's the kind of the same with what you're sort of saying, Graham, is in the size of how it could blow up. And the same with us, Marianne, like the size, if you see it as a problem and it says something that creates like a combativeness, and you brought someone in, it could go into something so big. But actually often, the solutions are sort of staring you in the face, just listening and experiencing a little bit is quite good.
You said to me, I don't know how many, I want X amount of sessions, but I don't know then how much. And I said, hopefully you don't need me. I can be there at the end of a telephone, but hopefully you don't need me, because actually what we've done is educate you. I'll get back to that again, is that if you educate people to understand themselves better, or other people.
That's the bit I just want to pick up on. That's going to be my closing question for today to both of you, right? Because I was sitting there thinking about this, and I was thinking, do you know what? One of the big things in the inclusion, diversity space, EDI space, etc., is awareness training, right? But then when I was sitting there listening to this whole conversation and I was thinking about it, I was thinking, do you know what? Actually, the biggest problem, as far as I perceive it, is that we potentially need to give people awareness training, right? And there's awareness training on visual impairment. There's awareness training on hearing impairment. There's awareness training on specific learning difficulties, on neurodivergence, and the list could go on. Mental health. You could go on and on and on. Do we need to actually start with awareness training of oneself? Right?
Yeah.
Is that the thing we actually ought to start with? Because ultimately, is part of the problem, and in all of those situations that I've talked about, the problem is that people couldn't see beyond themselves, and therefore, because they couldn't see beyond themselves, they weren't looking at what the community needed, right? If we start looking at if we start looking outwards rather than inwards, right? And
I encourage Prem to think about and to communicate what she needs. I think that was one of the things, wasn't it? To communicate. One of the things we've done recently is actually to reach out and say, look, with something that you were doing, to actually reach out and say, I really struggled with this, and this was why.
Yeah.
And this is what I need.
So there's a part there where we need to say more about what our needs are, and we need to open up about that. But also, as people, we need to stop thinking that the world revolves around us, and start looking outwards and going, actually, what does the world need, right? Or what do these people that are in front of me need in order to? I wrote my post on LinkedIn this morning, even kind of touched on that. I said, do you know what the most important topic is, or the most successful topic is to talk about on LinkedIn? It's you, right? If you're talking about me, right? If everybody writes about me, nobody else wants to hear about me. What they want to hear about is you. People want to be included in the conversation. It needs to be a narrative. It needs to be not just a rhetorical conversation. It needs to be a dialogue, right? This is not rocket science, right? But we walk around in our little kind of, let's talk about me. Let's make it about me. Everything's about me. I see the world like this, and we don't see the world from anybody else's perspective, right? And this stuff's hard. But if we start to try and understand other people's perspectives on things, then we come to more of a community solution on it. It's just it really is as straightforward as that.
I really liked that, Graham, of what you can give to people. What do they need? I mean, I agree. You can't also, when I think about empathy and come back to that and understanding, how do you, or you've heard the phrases like, how are you going to love someone else if you can't love yourself? Like, it sounds so, a bit saccharine sweet, really, but at its heart, it is knowing, and accepting. And having empathy with yourself in order to then be able to have that actually with others, and that self-judgment, self-criticism, negativity, kind of cutting yourself up into lots of different parts and with different masks on for all of our different activities in the day, work or otherwise. It forces you to project those things onto other people. And I think probably through those projections is where a lot of our tensions come from in general. So, I totally agree. I think also thinking about, not maybe what I need, but what I can contribute. That's a really big part of co-production as a method in general, because it is taking someone, especially if they're an excluded or marginalized community, and they've been told that their needs are difficult to solve, or they are, hard to reach. That gets used a lot in healthcare. Oh, we've got a really hard to reach community. So you kind of internalize this feeling of you've not got much to give, and actually empowering people to be like, what am I contributing? What can I do to change things for myself and the world around them? Small, little, and big. Is beautiful. Like the kind of work that we should all feel very proud of doing, I think, as well. And certainly in kind of the project that I'm building with Mendful, which is a bit of a play on mindful and mending, kind of fixing the relationship with ourselves, with the people around us, and with our world, like the community much larger than at those different levels, is thinking about having these kind of co-created, co-produced, community-led prevention models in healthcare, social care, and the wellness industry, building things that are more sustainable, actually also building networks of practitioners and people who are already doing this. They're already thinking about, decolonized healthcare systems and holistic practices, healthcare being housing, healthcare being food, communities spending time together, absolutely being part of your wellness. And then, developing these solutions, actually thinking with prevention in mind, rather than putting the energy into only solving the symptom.
Yeah, fixing the problem. I've been working on, I said, the Insight program, and what I love about Michael's Insight program is it's exactly that. It's educating. So basically, he will be educating people to go and work with practitioners, GPs, psychiatrists, to actually social prescribers, to be able to educate those people that may have ADHD, may not have ADHD, may have the symptoms, may have children that have it, may have parents or whatever, for them to be able to not actually maybe necessarily have to access services. It's actually about giving them a toolkit to be able to work on things themselves, but also those their family members being able to help them, rather than just, this person is a problem, how can we fix them? You probably can't fix them, actually, because they might not want to be fixed, because they're quite happy being who they are. They just might like some tools and, as you said, a bit of empathy and a bit of understanding. Because if anybody approaches us with that bit of empathy, every time we've worked together, there's a few times that you'd maybe had to cancel or needed to or whatever. I never judge, because we've all got crap going on, whatever it is. And I just think if you're met with empathy from somebody, and a lot of this came from my waitressing days, if you meet somebody with empathy, you're going to get a much different response from them.
Absolutely. Listen, this has been a brilliant conversation today. Thank you so much.
For me too. Thanks, Bo, for sharing.
I'm really excited. I'm excited to see. We've done a lot of work around Prem moving forward, because it's a scary thing. Going out on your own is scary. It's very scary, particularly at the moment. But if you've got a passion to do it, and I think what you've seen as well is, that I was helping work with you on one thing, but actually we brought Graham in to do other things, to be able to then showcase you in the way that you deserve to be. To be quite honest, you've had enough years of feeling not good enough, people putting you down, you putting yourself down, that you deserve, because you've got a lot to offer and some great ideas, and you need to be showcased.
Absolutely. Thanks, let's leave it on that very quickly, just to finish today then. Prem, if people are watching, who is it you want to speak to?
I want to speak to anyone who feels like they've had an experience that where they've not really been heard when it comes to, or a loved one hasn't been heard when it comes to healthcare, social care and wellness. And I talk about that really from, your food, your housing, whatever it is that you need to be well in the world and to be healthy. Anything that's taken away from that, and you want to think about those barriers or talk about them a bit more, reach out to me. Would love that.
Perfect. That's very succinct and direct request. And so hopefully people, if you're listening and that's you've been through the mill, as it were, with a healthcare service or a provider, and you just feel like you weren't listened to, or it just didn't happen, then do get in touch with Prem. What a brilliant show. I hope you've enjoyed it back out there as well. Whatever it was that you stopped doing for the hour to listen, thank you so much. If you carried on with your Excel spreadsheet, dear. Sorry about that. We will be back next week with more of the same. But until then, from Prem, Marianne, and myself, have a good week. And Lottie somewhere.
And Lottie.
Bye
Thanks
for now.
for having me.